And does your brand come across as the authority and so on? Is it sophisticated? So are you dealing with higher end customers who are very wealthy, very knowledgeable, maybe professionals? Or is it rugged? Some of you are old enough, my vintage, to remember the Marlboro Man. Well, in the cigarette world, that was the rugged brand, all right? If we think about Jeep started out as an army vehicle. Their brand is very rugged. So as you're looking through that list, just think about where do you fit in that spectrum? Which one of these definitions or descriptions stand out for you? And then there's also a list. This is on my website, and it's also a link to additional materials that's in the actual workbook at the back there. You can go on there later and take a look at the personality traits, review those, and start to think about the words that describe your brand. How do they work? And that will help you define who you are. So this is a top-end realtor in Toronto area. How many know this firm at all? Anybody? Anybody work with? No? Nobody? Okay. Anyway, he's in the $1 million plus level, so I think the average high-end home starts at about 1.7 million now. But he's carved a niche in his marketplace. What's interesting about his brand, first of all, he's got a monogram. The HK is like a monogram or a signature when you put on clothing, you know, for higher end clothing and so on. He actually has a magazine that shows also as part of everything that he does, including advertising. We worked with an accountant who's a CFO for hire and created a brand for their business, and we decided to create a magazine, high cost and everything. But it appeals to his market. Your brand should also appeal emotionally. Disney is a good example of that. A fellow named Scott Bradbury wrote a book called A New Brand World, and he says, great brands find relevant ways to tap into the emotional drivers that are already reside deep inside each of us, in our mind. That's the key with the brand as well, is it's got to be engaging, it's got to connect emotionally so that we have that connection that no one else has. What about using your signature as a brand, corporate brand? Could you do that with your business? Or you could work with celebrity. Anybody know who the person is on the left? Barbara Corcoran, yes, one of the top real estate agents in New York, but she also was on Shark Tank, and so she became an authority through that level, investing in other companies. Anybody know who the guy on the right is? No idea. Yeah, no, that's Justin Havertz. So he worked with Barbara to build a celebrity brand in the marketplace. That's another thing you can do. Well, I happen to be the chair of an organization called the Motorcycle Ride for Dads. So we raise money for prostate cancer research and awareness. One of our corporate sponsors, you can actually feature your products and post them on video. Some people post them through LinkedIn or Facebook and so on. Other people can post them on their sites, their websites, and brokerage sites and so on. Another way you can identify yourself as a realtor is how you, because that's what attracts your market. You can use slogans and taglines for your example. Just do it. It's a tagline. Happy place like her, that's business. In the real estate world, here's what she is involved in, lifestyle. Here's a realtor in Airdrie. I don't know if anybody knows this individual. I don't know if he's appeals to the market that you want to work with. You dress the part. In the speaking business, we were always told one of the things you need to do is dress like your audience, similar to your audience, but just a notch up. And that's one way of standing out in the market is who's your audience, who's your target market. How they dress when you meet them. They also focus on what the company does, the organization does, what you do for your customers. How do you come across with this? Here's one we did. We worked with Melbourne for 10 years. We worked with a number of developers in the history of our company, but Spruce Grove outside of Edmonton, most realtors and real estate companies have done difficult things to do. Because I think the important part is that if you can tell your prospect, so it stood up, people were attracted to that.
Yeah, it is great.
How about this one? Very cool. Real estate focus, you still see yourself working in this house and why it is successful. So use stories as much as you can. If they're your stories, imagine that that's original. Be able to tell your story. You want to engage the full brain with using story because it engages the right imaginary side of the left. We can mess with. The next one is, can we pay for marketing? Generally, that's called advertising. What channels can you use in that regard? There's lots of different places you can find stories, but the best ones to tell are your own stories. You can tell customer success stories, like I said. Here's the key, is you need to have a point to your story. If you ever saw planes, trains, and automobiles, you remember at one point the car had burnt up, they lost their airline tickets. Everything went wrong, and they checked into a hotel to find out it was one day. And here's some ways that you can think about it as far as a way of connecting with your audience. And again, this is in your workbook, so I'm not going to go in great detail to this, but go through that list and tell yourself what ones out of this work the best for me. From the marketing side, we're going to quickly through this, and then we're going to go into a Q&A. From the marketing side, we have what's called touch points. Places where we connect with our market. As a realtor, we need to know where is it do our customers find so much about you as it's about your story or the interests of the audience of the interviewer. That's the key. And that's called public relations. Of all of those things, that is right in the middle. That's where you can leverage earned, paid, and owned media to be able to connect with your audience. Again, this is in your workbook. It's also on the online resources. How do they reach out to you? So there's the awareness, the acquisition, the conversion, and the referral. He focused on the luxury markets. His brand is consistent in everything he does in that market niche. If you want to, if you're going after, say, condos versus luxury properties and so on, you may consider creating multiple brands. My recommendation is stick with me, attract them to your real estate agency. And last of all, what's their barriers to make that decision on who to work with? Go through that exercise and figure out awareness, acquisition, conversion, and referral. The last part is the corporate brokerage brand. And I had a few conversations with a few brokers in the room. They were a little nervous when I said I'm going to start talking about personal brand. And they said, oh my God, that's a nightmare. Here's the key. Your brokerage brand is important. And I think Scott said it earlier, is they do a lot of work to get their name out there in the marketplace. Create a lot of awareness, a lot of brand connection to the markets. With personal brand, do not detract from the personal or from the corporate brand. Add to it or supplement it. Now, in most real estate brokerages, they have a guide, a branding guide. And they'll tell you in there, in most cases, what you can and cannot do with your own personal brand. But you want to recognize that the brokerage brand has to be priority, then your personal brand. And in some cases, some realtors have an actual team as well. So that might be another brand as well. But think about all of those things before you go ahead and create a personal brand and start promoting it. The last part is, what's the purpose? The purpose is to create a brand that stands out in the market, builds a professional connection to your marketplace, reaches the target market you want to reach, and is consistent, congruent, and cohesive with your marketplace. Last of all, it better not suck. So you got to make sure that you make that connection in the marketplace. So on that note, I want to take some questions before we wrap up for the day. Kate's going to come up and field those questions for me. And in the back of your workbook, you'll see this information here. Like I say, there's additional resources online through those links. There's an ebook you can download that I have on my website. And after 2 months off last year, with the quarter 7,800 homes sold. No, I mean, to be serious, how do you know if it's not working? You're getting the wrong clients. You're having clients who are difficult to work with. They're not buying what you're selling.
Is there a certain amount of money you should spend a year on branding?
That's a good question. Typically with new companies, we look at, as far as your marketing budget, and branding is included as part of your marketing, that you spend about a 10% of your gross revenue in marketing. And like I say, branding is under that umbrella. The branding aspect of it, it's hard to put a number on that simply because you need to determine where your market is, who your target market is, and then how do you reach them. So that includes your marketing, your branding. And what you're doing is you're putting up a sign. You're basically saying, hey, I'm here branding, the more you're going to build traffic coming in to your business. There's two parts to marketing. There's outbound marketing, which is you promoting to the market. Then there's what we call inbound marketing. So that's things where people connect through social media, they might find you through email, or they may connect with you